Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Guy Cocker's Video Games Podcast. I'm out in Los Angeles for E3, the video games industry's biggest annual event, and today was the day when all the big console makers and game publishers had their press conferences. Microsoft announced that the Xbox One would cost £429 and be released in November 2013, while Sony revealed that the PlayStation 4 will cost a little bit less at £349 and also be out before the end of the year. EA announced Mirror's Edge 2, while Ubisoft had new titles The Crew and Tom Clancy's The Division. To digest all this news, I spoke to three of the most prominent video games writers in the UK for their thoughts. Chris Dring is Associate Editor for MCV magazine, Nick Cowen is a freelance writer for T3 and The Guardian, and Tom Hoggins is the video games editor for The Telegraph. I started by asking Chris what he thought of the show so far. So I'm joined by Chris Dring, who is the Associate Editor over at MCV. Chris, thanks for joining me.
Hello.
So Chris, we're at the Microsoft Xbox event tonight. It's the end of the first day of E3. Are there any highlights? What sort of sticks in your mind after today's event?
There's been a lot of highlights. It's been a barnstorming E3. So already, the Xbox 360 conference itself was just announcement after announcement after announcement. We didn't really have time to even think the amount of games that came out of it. I think actually my first... I think I have to join in with the whoops. I hate the whoops, but there were some great whoop moments in the EA one when Battlefront was unveiled. That got a massive cheer, but I was a bit surprised by that, to be honest. I didn't see that coming. The end of the Sony conference, when they effectively laid the smackdown, if I use that term, on the whole pre-owned and pricing issue. That was a very exciting and you could get wrapped up in it moment, even though actually I think Microsoft probably had the stronger conference in terms of games. There's a lot of games, here I can't wait to play and get into. So it's just felt like everyone got behind next gen, and it feels like EA got behind next gen. It was all about next gen. Ubisoft, they rushed through some of their current stuff they got coming out and then went straight into what was going next gen. So it's been a really exciting. I'm looking forward to what Nintendo do tomorrow.
So you mentioned that you felt Microsoft may have had the better games, but Sony had that price and that sort of used game dig or whatever you want to call it. Could you say do you think the price is going to hold Microsoft back and the used game stuff?
The used game stuff, I'm not entirely sure because they haven't really explained what it does. And if it's not as prohibitive as it might sound, then it should be fine. I imagine the average Joe consumer, hopefully, Microsoft will make it so it's not that confusing to them.
Part of the problem is it's just confusing to everyone, even me, and I've been covering it for a bit.
But yeah, exactly. So, but I don't know if in practice, I mean, they're explaining it all to us using the terms and the conditions. But I wonder if actually in reality, what we won't really notice, because we don't lend games to our friends that we don't know, do we? I mean, maybe we do. The pre-owned stuff will probably happen. I can't imagine many publishers charging for it, and even if they do, they're probably helping retailers out in other ways. So therefore, the prices will probably be the same. So the price of the actual console, I understand why Xbox have done it. It's connecting it, and it's a bigger package, I imagine. But it is very expensive, particularly for us Europeans who are not spending any money at the moment. So I think that might hold them back. I think PlayStation has some easy PR wins laid on their plate, so they could. I mean, the fact is they didn't end the conference on a great big game announcement. They ended their conference on a we're gonna let pre-own happen announcement, which was which isn't really anything at all, but it got the biggest cheer and claps and whoops and everyone on Twitter went crazy. So it's a good win for them, I think.
So you mentioned a few games there. Is there one from the show that you can't wait to play either this year or next year?
I'm really looking forward to playing Destiny. I don't know if it's on the show. I imagine it's on the show floor because I'm really a big fan of Bungie, so I'm looking forward to that. But it's actually some of the newer stuff that Destiny is a new IP, but I'm looking forward to giving a go. But some of the quirky things, I'm actually interested. I don't know if it's on the show floor. I'm interested in playing Knack. I know I shouldn't. I feel like I'm being contrary by saying that's a PS4 title I'm most looking forward to. But it's made by the guy that built the console, so it's got to be all right? So there's that. I'm actually, I know everyone talking about Xbox and PlayStation 4. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing what Nintendo finally show on Wii U. It's not been a great console so far, but they've got Smash Brothers and Zelda and Mario, and I love those games. So I really want to. I'm going to their thing tomorrow, and I'm going to give it a go.
So they're going to have a Nintendo Direct, which is effectively their press conference tomorrow. Do you think they're going to have some good Wii U stuff in store?
Yes. Well, we already know. I mean, they've already said they're going to show off the 3D Mario game. They're going to show off their Mario Kart. I'm not a big really care about Mario Kart too much, but that's interesting. They're going to show off their Wind Waker HD. I know it's just Wind Waker, but that's one of the greatest games ever made. They're going to show off Smash Brothers. Retro Studios are going to show off their new IP, or it might be a Metroid, I don't know. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. They're actually doing something behind closed doors in the conference where hosts and journalists get to go hands-on. So I'm really looking forward to that 10:30 tomorrow morning. So.
Yes, it's nice and early. Now, Chris, you're obviously, you work for MCV, you've got the business angle on things. What do you think? Is E3 still relevant as to the business of games, or is it, is it basically still relevant?
It's interesting, and it's a question that's obviously brought up. I mean, E3 tries to be relevant. Last year, it based its relevancy on the fact that Gree had a stand, which I thought was quite a weak argument. But this year, they've got a mobile and social pavilion to try and get those guys in. But nobody cares about mobile and social in an E3 where Xbox One. I think it's actually might be cycle driven. Last year the console cycle was 7-8 years old. We got to a stage where people were going, we're moving on to tablets and PCs, and gamers were going elsewhere for their new gaming experiences. And then E3 felt a little bit old hat. This year it's never felt more relevant. It'll be interesting. It depends how these consoles perform will depend on how E3 stays it. Because E3 is a trade show. It is for retailers as well as journalists. And if retailers aren't going to have not a big role in the industry, you have to wonder why you need to put these things on display. Because you can speak to journalists in a manner of ways. You can speak to consumers in a different way. Nintendo are doing this year. So, if the Xbox One PS4, which I'm sure they will fly come the end of the year, then E3 will be around for many years to come. People always say it. Apparently, I speak to ESA a lot, who the organisers, and they often say we get asked this question every 5 years: Are you relevant? Are you relevant? And then they've been around. The E3's been going for years and years and years. I think it'd be a shame if it didn't happen. Right? It's like an exciting moment. There's media here. There's journalists here from publications that never cover games except for this one time in the year, and it'll be a real big shame if that went away. So it's a bit of it's our Cannes Film Festival, isn't it? It's our moment.
So, Chris, I want to talk to you about the general kind of, the atmosphere of being out here and covering this show. You mentioned the whooping and the hollering quite a lot. Is that a point of frustration for you with difference of? I guess it's mostly Americans that tend to do it during the press conferences.
I sat next to two people at the Sony conference who just whooped and hollered and clapped the whole time. And when they weren't whooping, hollering, and clapping, they were talking. And I just wanted to drown them. But the thing is, that's part of the excitement. I mean, I actually love the atmosphere of E3. I mean, I wasn't sure if I was coming here at one point, and when I was actually a bit worried I wouldn't, because I really wanted to be here. Yeah. And you also get a vibe here from people you don't really get. You see the cynicism on social networks and online, which happens when you get here and you actually speak to people who are selling the things and the journalists that are covering it. You probably get a better idea of actually what people really think.
Sure.
And it's been pretty good so far.
Yeah. The people I've talked to is nothing but positive. Yeah. In fact, I'm going to ask you the same question. Is there anything that disappointed that you saw today, where you were expecting greatness and it maybe fell short?
Personally, I really wanted to see a Fable game during the Xbox conference. I didn't. I wanted to see an Uncharted game during the PlayStation conference, and I didn't.
I'm with you on that one.
Not really. I mean, some people have said the Ubisoft conference was a bit weak. I don't think it was, actually. I think you're comparing it to its best ever conference it ever had last year. Yeah. It was never going to beat that, and I think it was pretty good. I think Matt said the new Tom Clancy game didn't get the best demo it had, because on paper it sounds a lot better, and Massive make great games, but even they showed off a load of new IP. A lot of driving here. There's a lot of driving games going around, and persistent worlds and stuff like that. So driving fans have plenty to choose from. But no, I've not been disappointed yet. We'll see how the show itself obviously is a bit of a wreck, but we'll see how it goes when you're running from West Hall to South Hall for appointments that don't match up. But, yeah.
Have you got any great stories from previous E3s? Anything that sticks in your mind as like a typical amazing E3 experience?
It's a very hard. You said you were going to ask me this question before, and I don't entirely know what the answer is. I remember my first E3, I made the horrendous error of booking, of not getting my appointments in the right hall, and I'm effectively probably burnt off my body weight running between the two calls. I remember seeing Star Trek before Star Trek turned out to be terrible, because I found out that they were announcing it. Somebody told me they were announcing it, and I got whisked into this weird special room to see Star Trek game behind closed doors in an area of the conference center I didn't even know existed. But they're always memories. Some of them I can't repeat. But in fact, this has probably been the best E3 since I can remember, really. Since my time in the industry, certainly. So it feels quite exciting to be here.
Good stuff. Well, Chris, you've got to pace yourself. It's the first night. Where can people find more of your work? You're on MCV, you're on Twitter. Where should people look?
They should look on mcvuk.com. That's the website. You can also download the magazine from there, which is what I actually write. And you can follow me on Chris_Dring at Chris_Dring.
Chris, enjoy the rest of E3.
Thank you very much.
So I'm joined by Nick Cowen, who is a freelancer for T3 and The Guardian and many others. Nick, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Nick, so we're at the Microsoft Xbox One, I guess party/event at the end of the first day of E3. What's kind of caught your eye? What have you thought has gone well today in the Microsoft, Sony, Ubisoft and EA press conferences?
Basically this is all works out in chronological order, but when I was at the Microsoft press conference, I thought it went very, very well. I thought it came out like gangbusters. It was very, very slick. They had exactly the right amount of gameplay, exactly the right amount of games. You know, they launched like 13 exclusives, and you thought, wow, they really are investing heavily in this platform. And then they kind of cooled it towards the end by going, well, it'll cost you $499 or £429. Everyone went, you'd better have something really good to say to us after that. They did. They had Titanfall. But that was obviously before we saw what happened at the Sony conference this evening, which kind of felt like that scene from Spartacus, where everyone was leaping up and going, I'm Spartacus. And the fact that you don't have DRM, that you can sell your second-hand games and lend them to whoever you like, that you don't have to ever turn it online if you don't want to. You know, these are all boxes that I think Microsoft needs to tick now if they're going to keep up.
So lots to talk about there. So you were at those press conferences. I was there. Saw it's Titanfall, isn't it? I keep getting it right. It's been a long day. So Titanfall, I was really surprised with. I thought I would be impressed by it, but I was really impressed by it. I thought it looked great.
Yeah, me too. I mean, and the funny thing was, I was less impressed by the fact that it had big clanking guns and what looked like quite brutal shooter action, because by that time I'd been kind of assaulted by the speakers in the Galen Center, and I felt like I'd been hit around the head. I was more interested in the way that the sort of foot soldiers could leap up and flow parkour and then jetpack and not break their flow. I thought that was very, very cool. I also thought the fact that when you get into a mech, it had an almost like plasmid-esque ability to pick up bullets with a magnetic field and fling them at people. I thought that was really, really cool. I mean, when you say it's people battling mechs, it sounds really dull, but then you see it in action and you go, wow, okay, well, there's a reason that, you know, these guys worked for Infinity Ward and took them to the heights they did at one time.
So how did they get that as an Xbox exclusive? That's the big question.
I have no idea. You'd have to...
I mean, it obviously involves money, but I mean, it's crazy that that's not coming out on PlayStation, I think.
It is crazy, but I mean, you know, like I said, it looks like Microsoft are very heavily invested in this platform, and, you know, there seems to be at least some some evidence behind their claim that, you know, it's a gaming console first and foremost, and they're backing that up with, you know, exclusive titles. So they clearly want the core's business. I mean, what I thought was interesting about the titles we saw at the Microsoft keynote was the fact that even though they were all aimed at pretty hardcore players, the net was pretty wide. I mean, you had shooter action, you had oddities, like in the form of Swery's new game, D4, which I don't even know what to make of that trailer. You had, now I've gotten this name like wrong 5 times. Was it Sunset Overload?
Yes, yeah. Yes, it was. I think it's here tonight. Sunset Overload. Yeah.
Yeah, which looks like the illegitimate offspring of Tex Avery cartoons and Crackdown.
This is the Insomniac game.
Yeah. And then you also had, you know, Project Spark, which I thought looked rather naff when they brought it on stage, but then you realise, oh, you could actually create a sort of mini Dungeons and Dragons game for your friends and these worlds for you all to frolic in, which I thought was very cool.
Or Geometry Wars, or there were lots of examples in there. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, you know, like I said, I think their net was cast quite wide. I mean, I think we've seen some great games today. I mean, I thought the Battlefield multiplayer reveal was very, very cool. I thought that The Division, Tom Clancy's The Division, and also the Crew looked amazing as well. And it was great to see more of Watch Dogs, because we haven't really seen much of the plot, so we can kind of get our head around what you're actually going to be doing in that game.
So you mentioned mentioned early on that the Microsoft conference was very slick. You also mentioned the booming sound of those presentations. You've been to many E3s, Nick. Can you explain a bit of the sort of atmosphere of doing these press conferences back to back in a day and what the sort of toll that takes on you?
Well, it's quite hard because the first thing you have to do is to fight the urge to go to sleep before they start, because you usually get sat in a nice cozy chair in the dark with a sort of a low murmur all around you. Luckily, the loud sound effects keep you awake. But it's kind of breakneck. You get up with the crack of dawn. You're off by 7:25. The big fight is the press credentials and getting between the venues. Once you're sat in your chair with your laptop open and you've connected to the Wi-Fi, you're like, all right, we're going to be all right now, and you can kind of relax and then get into it. But that's nowhere near as breakneck, I think, as actually going to the floor and trying to manage your appointments one after the other. Especially because, if you're a poor freelancer like me, you don't have a lot of money to spend on things like food. So what I do, pro tip, I grab 3 apples from the complimentary apple bin at the gym at my hotel, stick them in my bag, eat my own body weight in breakfast, and then just power on through it. By the end of the day, you've got a nice cardio workout.
And then going back to the press conference that we've just been to, come from Sony, what did you think about a PlayStation? Obviously, the price was a big talking point, and used games as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm very intrigued by the Order. That ticks so many of my boxes, it's not even funny. It's like a darker, nastier version of Dishonored. I'm into steampunk and I'm into Victorian London. I think the next Assassin's Creed game should be set in Victorian London. I think that'd be great. So to see that someone's doing something similar to that is really, really a marvel to behold. Like you said, it's hard to talk about Sony's press conference without going over the areas where they completely and utterly battered Microsoft. But the funny thing is about that is that, I think that they differed in terms of pacing. Like I said, Microsoft was very, very slick, whereas I did find myself towards some parts of it slightly drifting off, because the way that they'd structured was very high moments and then long lulls. But that's what Sony does every single year.
It was 2 hours long, for crying out loud.
Yeah, editing, that's what's required.
And so you've been to many E3s, Nick. I want to just kind of pick your brains. I mean, where does this stand in the sort of, right now, obviously it's still early days, but in the history of E3s, is this a good year or a bad year? And also, do you have any sort of crazy E3s that stick in your mind? Any great stories to tell?
Okay, I think it's a great E3. I think that it's become, the video games industry is more competitive than it ever has been, and lots of people are having to bring their A game to even survive in this market. And that might sound a bit cutthroat, but the real winner in there is our players, because there's now we're at the beginning of a new console cycle. There's tons of new IPs coming out. The only franchises that will make the jump and survive are the ones that we want to survive, who have become favourites over the last 6 or 7 years. So I think it's a really exciting time to be a gamer. As far as E3 stories go, I think the one that leaps to mind when you say that is probably the Kinect reveal event in 2010, I think it was.
Sure, at this stage I can't remember what I've just seen all day, but yeah, it sounds about right, 2010.
Yeah, but I don't know if you were there, but it was in the Galen Centre again, and there was some sort of weird kind of play that was put on by the Cirque du Soleil, and it started off with a kid running up a hill, and we were basically led to believe by the narrative that since the dawn of time we've been leading up to Kinect as an evolutionary step in our evolution as a species. And then you saw families in boxes turning at 180-degree angles and playing games upside down with this weird kind of ballet going on in the middle of the room. And I thought the only thing missing from this is a prog rock band like Rush, and then it'll be complete.
So that's not how you play Kinect at home? You're not upside down hanging from a wire or in a box?
Oh, if only. The thing was, the postscript to that story, though, is that we were all given white ponchos with these big shoulder pads to sit up in the rafters, and at one point this huge screen was projected onto all of our chests, and our shoulder pads started flashing with green light, and I just thought, I'm clearly in a video that's been directed by Spike Jonze, and of course to face all that, completely jet lagged, it was a really surreal experience.
So it's a big question, Nick, so apologies for the grand scale of it, but is E3 still relevant, do you think?
I think it's still relevant. I think it's going to remain relevant for a long time to come. It's going to take either a cataclysmic event or an increased disinterest in this medium to make it less relevant.
Nick, where can we find more of your work? Are you on Twitter? Can we find your central website anywhere?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've got a Twitter account, which is White Noise, WYTENOYZE. You can find me at T3, you can find me at The Guardian, and I'm sometimes skulking around official Xbox 360, but also mainly CVG.
Nick, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
So I'm joined by Tom Hoggins, who is the games editor over at Telegraph. Tom, thanks for joining me.
No problem at all.
So tell me, we're here at the Microsoft Xbox, I guess, event. Tell me what your highlight of the first day of E3 2013 was.
Oh, highlight. Oh, God. I thought it was a lot, actually. I thought it was a really good day from Microsoft's conference right through to Sony's conference. A lot of really good stuff. I thought Titanfall looked excellent. Probably my highlight from Microsoft, at least, was either Quantum Break, which I think is really interesting, or D4, because I love Deadly Premonition.
Right.
I think Swery 65 is awesome. EA's was really fun. It just felt like the industry's got a little bit of swagger back now.
Right.
Last year was a little bit sort of coming to the end of the generation, we're just sort of winding down, and this year it just feels like everyone's sort of really picked it up again. And especially with the sort of Sony having little digs at Microsoft as well, just kind of feels like there's a real sort of battle going on now, and that's exciting, really exciting.
So Titan Force keeps coming out. Is it Titan? I keep forgetting the full name of it. The Respawn title. Is it Titan?
It's Titanfall.
Titanfall. So that keeps coming up. A lot of people I've spoken to have really enjoyed it. Was it a surprise for you that it's just going to be an Xbox exclusive?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I don't know. I'd love to know the reasoning behind it. I couldn't begin to speculate, but yeah, it is a surprise, because you think something like Respawn and EA, they're traditionally very, multi-platform, so you'd think they would want to go, but for whatever reason they're not, and maybe it's something to do with how the Xbox One is set up, possibly, but again, I'm literally just guessing now.
And so did you do all of the press conferences today, or was it just Microsoft?
No, I managed to get to all of them, which is exhausting, but they're all so good that I honestly didn't mind. It was really good fun.
So tell us about the Ubisoft and EA ones. What were the highlights there? Do you think they had a good show? Do you think they had plenty of good games there?
Yeah, EA in particular, I enjoyed a lot. I mean, they seem to... EA can often have a sort of reputation of being quite a buttoned-down company, and just at their press conference they seem just a little bit more relaxed and just kind of sort of just having a little bit of fun, I think, which is really nice.
There was a nice moment at the beginning which you wouldn't have seen on the live stream, where Peter Moore came out and sort of had a dig at a few outlets, Kotaku, Polygon. That was quite nice, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Moore obviously has a little bit of a reputation for doing that, but I think he kind of enjoys it, and hopefully the sites do as well, because it's good that they kind of do have that kind of interaction where the journalist and the sort of executive are speaking to each other on a slightly more level playing field than just being sort of back and forth interviews.
And then finally, Sony. Is it fair to say the big news was price and used games? Was there more going on there from someone that was at the actual conference? I mean, there was a lot of whooping and hollering going on.
There was a lot of whooping. I know Sony do get their fans in, so there is that kind of really sort of pressure cooker atmosphere in there, where everyone's getting very excited about certain things. But I mean, it was a huge surprise. I mean, not so much the DRM stuff. I mean, you kind of thought if Sony had decided they weren't going to go the same route as Microsoft, that they would shout about it, because it would be a fantastic PR victory, and so it proved. I think the price was a huge surprise. I mean, $100 and what is it, 76 quid cheaper? That's a big difference. I do wonder if that's going to, the events at Sony's going to make Microsoft rethink things at all. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of days.
Do you think that it's with the policies that they've got and the price that they've got, that Microsoft needs to reevaluate its strategy now, or have they got enough good games to make people go out and buy that machine? Do you think?
I think they definitely need to think about it. I mean, it's been so high-profile coverage about the whole DRM thing that, I mean, they'll be aware of how it's coming across in the press. I mean, the thing that I guess they have to sort of make a decision on is whether they think that's going to affect the kind of mainstream sort of outlook on it. which will be interesting. But I mean, it's, you know, because Sony have come out, not only did they say they weren't going to do the same things, they sort of took the party line that it's wrong, and they're sort of, you know, sticking up for the consumer, and that's, you know, it's fantastic PR for them. But yeah, so Microsoft will have to think carefully. I mean, whether they will, I mean, you know, smarter men than I have done the maths about this whole thing.
Sure, I know.
So, but yeah, I think there'll be conversation. I mean, whether they'll change it, I don't know, but I'm sure there'll be conversations after that.
So, as someone that's been to a few E3s, Tom, where does this stand in the sort of history of E3s? Is it a good year? And is E3 still relevant, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is my fourth time in 5 years, I think. And this is by far my favourite so far, and it's only been one day as well. Right. It's just, and I think E3 is very relevant, and I think today has proved it. You know, when these kind of big launches are coming along, and these sort of back and forth between the companies sort of come about, I think it's really exciting. And I think, and you know, for all the talk about Sony's sort of digs at Microsoft, I thought Microsoft had a really good show. I thought, you know, they were under pressure to deliver, and I thought they had a really strong lineup, really varied, you know, stuff like Project Spark and say D4. So yeah, it's been great.
Any disappointments at all? I know we've been quite positive. Was there anything that was shown that you were like, oh, maybe that's not so good, maybe that wasn't as impressive as I hoped?
No, I've been talking to a lot of people today, and funnily enough, the one thing that's been a constant with most people I've spoken to is that they've said there hasn't been one game that they were disappointed by. It's like, obviously they have our favourites, and some games not so much interest me, because even like for instance, I thought the single player Battlefield stuff didn't really float my boat.
Really? It was shooting through a ship and all the planes falling? I thought it was quite good.
Yeah, well, the single player stuff didn't really excite me, but then they showed the multiplayer stuff, which did look really exciting, and suddenly it's like now I'm even excited for that, a game that I wasn't particularly before. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm racking my brains because I'd like to be sort of professional critic, but it's tough. I think it's been.
No, it's good. I mean, there have been many references during press conferences. I think Ubisoft's where journalists are, you know, a little bit, you know, disgruntled at times. So it's nice to be positive, I think.
No, well, I think the thing with Ubisoft, I mean, from my point of view, I didn't think they had a particularly great conference in how they presented their games. You kind of look at their portfolio and you see the variety they've got, from Rocksmith to Just Dance, and you know, it's not, you know, that's not going to be for everyone, but they've got such a wide portfolio now. You know, Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs, and the Division. And it's like, so you know, even that weird Rabbids TV show thing. I mean, you know, I'm not sure I'd like my son screaming at the TV too much, but you know, there's a market for all these kind of things. I think that's what's really great, and Ubisoft they do seem to get that, which is nice.
Cool, Tom. I'm going to let you get back to playing Xbox One games and checking them out. Where can people find more of your stuff? Obviously, you're at the Telegraph. Are you on Twitter or anything else?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Tom Hoggins, and Telegraph is just telegraph.co.uk/videogames.
Tom, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for E3 2013 for today. I'm out for appointments tomorrow at the Convention Centre, but I'll be back very soon. For more information on the show, follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/GuyCocker. Thanks again. Please do leave me a review on iTunes, and I'll see you again next time.